Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the start of summer break. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I can't wait to say welcome back to the F1 season. It's going to be a long few weeks that the drivers and teams get some nice time off. So they deserve it. They've earned it. But we're still here to talk about all things F1, League of Legends, Magic the Gathering, and anything else that comes up. Justin, good to see you this week.
Yeah, good to see you too, my friend. Happy to be back. We had a bit of a packed weekend, some interesting developments coming out of the F1 paddock, obviously. We had some pretty good games, especially the LPL series that we'll talk about later. Lots of Magic the Gathering in general, but overall, before we get into that, Aaron, I want to hear about your week.
Yeah, week has been pretty good. I'll get right into my Rose, Thorn, and Seed. For my Rose, this past weekend, as I had talked about last week on the episode, was me and Colleen's anniversary. So we ended up going kayaking, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately, when we were about 10 minutes away from getting there, while I was watching the qualifying, Colleen was driving. I'm sitting in the passenger seat. It's 11 minutes left in Q3. It says we're 10 minutes away from our destination, and I lose cell phone service completely. So damn. I didn't get to see the end of quali till a bit later. But really nice time out on the river kayaking. It's my first time in probably 3 or 4 years that I've been out doing something like that. So that was cool. We then bounced around one of the towns nearby, New Hope, which is this cool little hippie town in the middle of Pennsylvania. So we were kind of wandering through, checking things out. They have a hot sauce shop there, and the guy who was running it was the hippiest of men I think I've ever met in my life. Just looks like he's straight out of a Scooby-Doo concert or something like that. He's got long hair, the glasses on. He's probably about 60 years old. Really longer beard and everything. All of his hair is gray, and so he's just sitting there and chatting us up for 10, 15 minutes as we're looking at hot sauces around and just talking our ear off about, oh, there's this hot sauce and that hot sauce. Oh, this guy dropped off 3 bottles for me that he personally makes. They're infused with THC. So they're THC hot sauces. He had them marked for I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000 on his shelf or in his cabinet, because it was they're the only ones in existence, and the guy who made it is getting a patent on it or something to make infused hot sauce. So we just had a nice little day of kayaking and then going around this cool little town and talking to the crazy old guy in the hot sauce shop.
When you said bounced around, I had an image of you and Colleen on, those workout balls with the handle that are just big blow up things and just hopping down the street.
It's a good image, not quite how it went.
Gotcha.
It was a little too packed for that, to be honest. There were a lot of people.
Yeah,
it was weird. There were a lot of people in town, and so their sidewalks were pretty crammed, it felt like, compared to what I'm used to. So, gotcha. And it's kind of like what I imagined when I went to Gatlinburg, that town would be except just in the South. It was very small town. Every single place is a mom and pop shop. There's no chain anything anywhere. Yeah. Cool little strip with all sorts of stuff. It was neat. So it was kind of weird. I'm like, wow, this is exactly what I imagined down south and not what I had imagined here, but it was cool.
Very cool.
So, so yeah, fun weekend. We really enjoyed that, and some nice, just relaxing days. My thorn this week is we have a new guy at work. He's been there for a little bit now, and he is just a little bit like he's a slow learner. I'll say, and so he has the eagerness. He's super friendly and everything. A little overly like talkative sometimes, but it is what it is. I talk a lot too, so I can't really say too much about that. But he is the most forgetful person that I think I've ever met in my life. Like, I'll teach him how to do something, and then like setting up our coffee station in the morning. It's something pretty straightforward. I picked up on it in a day, and then just have been doing it. And I've shown him how to do it a few times. And this morning I came in a little late. I got my I had to pick up my car from the shop, so I came in late. And I get there, and he's like, "Oh, I did the coffee station." And I look over, and like the machine is clean and like ready to go to make coffee, but there's like barely any cups, no creamers, like no lids, just like all the whole station. The only thing he did was set up like the physical coffee thing pretty much, and like be like, "Oh yeah, I cleaned it, it's all good to go, it's ready to make coffee," and then like didn't do any other part of it. And I was just like, okay, so now I'm gonna have to like I've had to create him a to-do list of like daily things that he does just as reminders so that he doesn't forget to do them. So like super nice guy, super friendly. I have a lot of positives. I think he will eventually learn, but he's just slow to pick up on things, and so it's been a bit tougher for me to like just get through my things when I'm having to like repeat instructions again and again.
Yeah.
So
Damn, man, that sounds super frustrating.
yeah, it's tough because I do really like him as a person. I think he's super like nice, cool guy. And I just that kind of eases it because I'm like, at least he's a good person and he's trying, as opposed to someone who's just being lazy and like doesn't care at all or something. I'm like, at least he cares. He's just like not picking up on it quickly. But
Well, what's he doing when he's not doing the things that he should be doing? If he's not lazy, you know what I mean? Like,
well,
if he doesn't know what his to-do list is, what is he doing otherwise?
well, he's constantly asking me and our property manager for like, "Oh, do you guys need help with anything? Oh, do you?" And so like we always have more than enough stuff that we're doing to be able to like give him some things to like go do, not realizing that he's asking to do stuff and help us out without like doing his things first.
Right.
Like, we're just under the assumption, because we're not babysitters. We're not like checking in to be like, "Did you do this or did you do that?"
Right.
So if he's asking for stuff to do, I assume that he's already done all of his stuff. So
Sure, no, but it's a tornado in the toy room still.
little bit. So
Yeah, I'm with you.
He's progressed a little bit, but it's just it's slow going. But overall, like, it's another set of hands at least to help us keep things moving and doing what we need to do. And if I have to remind him here and there, I'm just hoping he'll eventually pick it up. So
Sure.
So that is my thorn for this week. And my seed is that I'm planning a trip for Colleen and I for her 30th birthday coming up this fall. I'm like proud of myself because I'm being proactive and trying to like get everything set a decent bit ahead of time instead of being last minute Larry and just waiting till I end up like scrambling to put things together. So my procrastination is usually getting the better of me. So this is a nice step forward.
That's interesting. Like, what is procrastination exactly?
So
Like, what is it that's going on?
for me, for a lot of my life at least, it's been that I struggle to like find a place to start with things. So
Hmm.
I like it's something from things I've read and whatnot. It's something that a lot of people with ADHD experience, but like when you have a lot of things to do, most people would be like, okay, like let me do this, let me do that, let me do this, and like just start checking things off the list. My brain immediately wants to go, let's do everything at one time. And so I like start all these little things and little tasks that are all part of it. But like because I'm just skipping around so much back and forth to different thoughts and different things, it like delays me starting things or completing things that I need to do. So it's more of a prioritization issue that creates this whole mess of me doing like 20 things at once in my brain or like
Mm,
in regard to whatever I'm supposed to be doing.
gotcha.
So yeah, like for me, it's not as much that I just like wait to do it. It's like I get stuck figuring out where to start and prioritizing those things, and then I end up last minute or later than I would like being like, oh my god, this thing's about to come up. I really just have to like power through and just get all of this stuff done. So it's more of a, yeah, like it slows me down to the point that I end up not getting things done as quickly as I should.
Gotcha. Trying to like work on too many sections of the puzzle, but never being able to just like chunk it out in a like organized
Yeah.
fashion.
That's a great example. It's like, oh, like these two pieces fit together and these two pieces fit together. And I'm
Hmm.
finding all these little pieces in the pile that fit together with each other. But instead of just being like, okay, here's a corner, let's build the border. Okay, let's work in, let's do this. Oh, that section's all this color. Like my
Hmm.
brain doesn't typically work like that.
Interesting.
I think for me, procrastination is more of just figuring out how to uh, make myself like go through a systematic like progression of things.
Hmm.
I'm sure for some people it's just laziness and then like laziness to do things that are like that they still find important. There
Yeah.
so it's important that they do it because they're like eventually decide, oh, this is the deadline that I have to
Hmm.
do this thing, and so they rush to do it. So they do care about it getting done, but I think for a lot of people, it's like the laziness of just like, I'd rather do this for now until it
Right.
comes up to that point.
Well, and then like a healthy dose of like your brain not firing properly, like you said, it's like a symptom for ADHD that a lot of people deal with. So yeah, that interesting. That makes sense. But yeah, I'm happy to hear that you're yeah, just like settling the reservations and getting everything scheduled way ahead of time because then when it comes to that day, you can basically just like, pick up your tickets, grab your keys and say, "Yeah, we're fucking out of here." And it's like no problem at all.
Yeah, and it's also definitely cheaper to do it this far ahead of time too, which is a
Yeah,
nice
exactly.
positive too. So so that's my rose, thorn, and seed for the week. A lot of tangents and whatnot, but yeah, it's been a pretty good week. Justin, how have you been? How's your week going?
Doing really well. Just chugging along here. Had a pretty good week overall. My rose here for the week. So just want to comment on a inside joke that me and Sarah have running. And the reason it's my rose today was because I was just like, just sitting staring into the void, and just a thought of that joke came up, and I just started laughing out loud. So I figured that could be my rose today. She she has a tendency to like fall asleep towards the end of a movie or like right at the end of something. She's just like she's Sleepy Carl, right? And so we have a running joke about how she needs to start a YouTube channel, call it Nap Time, and capitalize on this whole market that like nobody's doing yet. And so the running bit is always just both of us going like, "What's up, guys? Welcome back to Nap Time. Today we're doing a 20-minute nap in the bedroom, no comforter with a sleep mask. Next week, coming at you, we're gonna have blah blah." And we just like do the standard like YouTube bullshit, right? And
That's
it's
awesome.
just so funny. And secretly, I actually wish she starts the YouTube channel, but because personally, I think it'd be hilarious. Anyway, that's just like a running joke that we have, and I thought of it and it made me laugh. So that was my rose.
That's awesome. I feel like that is. Well, I mean, we were talking about like inside jokes right before the podcast with like close friends and people like that in our lives, and so having some of those just like ridiculous thoughts, especially ones that just like carry on into these long-standing inside jokes, is it's always fun.
Yeah, dude, it's hilarious. Like we've been talking about it like probably since pandemic, and so yeah, it's just a good one of the ones that lasted. Now my thorn here for the week, a little different. So overall, it's not really a thorn, but more of just like a little bit of a lesson. So, and I know we've talked about it before. Do you know the 5 P's of performance?
Ugh. I know.
Proper preparation prevents poor performance. All right.
I knew
So
preparation was in there.
I definitely had that in mind when preparing for a new client. It was going to be a little bit of a different session that I was like used to, but have been preparing for. So, long story short is I did so much prep for one aspect of it that when I was like prompted about another aspect, I actually kind of came up blank. Like it was almost like the trap game in a super week where you prep so much for the T1 or the Dom1 or the EDG that like you just get beat by Golden Guardians because like you had no clue what they were gonna do. Like it felt like one of those moments
Yeah.
where I know if I was being given like a class grade, it definitely would have been a 92 or a 93. But there were core things that I could have done differently. And then in thinking about them, I was like, oh man, it was this. I even had the tool in my repertoire. I didn't need to like look anything up or learn it. I had it if I would have just like thought a little bit more. And overall, everything went really well. I think we'll see them again. And it was only like my picking apart of the performance I think that like ended up mattering, but I just use it as like a little reminder like, hey, it's cool, just remember like you can't, yeah, like don't get trapped game. You can't trap game. Like you can't just look at one aspect of it, think of outliers or like X factors that could come up. So that was a bit of a thorn, but overall just like a happy little reminder of like, okay, yeah, like we can all improve on something.
Yeah, and it's not one of those things where you're like, oh, well, it completely ruined this person's like session and everything. It was just like reflection on what you could have done better or differently, and that's like a good thing to be able to do and look at. So I mean, one, if you see this person again and everything, you'll have some additional thoughts on like things that you can work with them on and like how you can work through it, or like you'll just have it and you won't forget that one ever again for any future people that you have that have a similar type of issue or something that needs to be worked on similarly. So it's definitely got the silver lining.
Either way, no matter what outcome, it's a win-win scenario. So an interesting thorn here for this week. And then my seed here Interestingly, looking forward to Friday. I think me and Sarah have some time slotted out where we're going to be able to do some furniture shopping. I think we're looking
Nice.
for two new chairs for the office and hopefully a new bookshelf here for up at the apartment, to where we can spread out a little bit more. We have some things like double stacked, so it's tough to know what's behind it, and it ends up like organizationally not looking that good. So looking forward to having access to more, more space in the apartment to spread some of those books out because me and Sarah do be reading a lot. But that is my rose thorn seed here for the week. Looking forward to talking about the race in Hungary here.
Yeah, and of course, before the race in Hungary, we did get the announcement that Sebastian Vettel is retiring after the season. I was like not super surprised by it, but I wouldn't have been surprised. It was like I wouldn't be surprised if he kept driving for another year or two. I wouldn't be surprised if he retires now. And with seeing like some of his public appearances and things like that he's had recently, and talking about kind of all of his activism type things that he is supporting with all sorts of different organizations around the world. I think that probably, along with just like being closer to family, he was just like, it's time. I'm in this Aston Martin. I'm not competing. I'm competing to try and get P10 and get 1 point. Like, I think this is where I can go and enjoy the other parts of my life.
Yeah, and I know he was talking in the media pen ahead of the weekend. I guess it's like the media time on like Thursday or Friday or whatever. And he mentioned having time away from his kids every time he has a race weekend and all the engagements and this and that. And he was just starting to realize that it's more of a cost than the benefits that he gains out of racing. He was happy for to have the memories and this and that, but yeah, overall I think a necessary step forward for somebody like who is trying to grow a family and this and that. And yeah, I think your angle about the Aston Martin is dead on, where it's like, yeah, he's not like competing for any more championships in his career. And it seems like it would take a lot more time to get that Aston Martin to like any kind of winning form that he would want to like really stick around for. So yeah, it seems like from his career perspective, yeah, it seems fine. Seems to make pretty good sense. I think from a person who enjoys watching him race and seeing him smile on race weekends in the media pen and talk about this and that, from that perspective, yeah, I am gutted to see him go, to be sure.
And I just hope that in future years of F1, he has opportunities to come on and talk. I would love to hear him on the broadcast. I'd be excited to see that pop up on my Twitter feed, to see Seb being there at Grand Prix to talk about. Because one, I mean, just some stats for him. 4 world championships, of course, 53 race wins, 122 podiums. He has a ton of great knowledge, and he's very well spoken. So the thought of having him on the broadcast and really providing some additional like thoughts, analysis, and everything week to week, or even just here and there, would be pretty cool. But yeah, a good career trajectory and a good place to kind of end it, I think. So congrats to him on a really great career, and I'm hoping for some solid races for the rest of the season out of Seb.
Yeah, and this puts us to an interesting spot because we had some other contract shenanigans that occurred after the race.
Yeah,
But
so
this seems like a fine time to talk about that. And you let talk us through what kind of happened here, because it was a whole bunch of media posts here.
yeah. Well, before we even get to that part of it, this is
Hmm.
so Seb retiring kind of starts the ball rolling. The midseason break is typically a big contract negotiation time. Teams are looking to solidify things for the next season. They've gotten a good idea of how their driver has done throughout the year, whether they're looking at re-signing or other teams are reaching out to people or people are reaching out to teams and vice versa. So this kind of gets the ball rolling in the sense that like now there is a seat open in a team that, I mean, they're definitely trying to win and they have a lot of backing. The Stroll family and Lawrence Stroll, like they are willing to pay the money to have a successful team. They're not doing too hot this year, but you can see that they're attempting, like, whether you want to talk shit on the pink Mercedes in years past and things like that with Racing Point and then becoming Aston Martin. Lawrence Stroll definitely wants to be successful in F1, so that is going to be a seat that is pretty coveted, like because there is that money backing and you know that team's going to be staying for a while. So there's that. And then you just have this kind of snowball effect. So Aston Martin's seat is open. Fernando Alonso jumps, and right as the summer break lets out for all the drivers, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm out and going to Aston Martin next year. So Aston Martin moved quickly to find another veteran driver to fill that seat. And then now there's an Alpine slot open. So Alpine quickly is like, oh, well, we didn't expect Fernando to leave, clearly. So what are our options? We haven't been talking to any drivers. We haven't been trying to figure things out. Oh, well, Oscar Piastri, an F3 champion, is our reserve driver. He had success in F2. That's why we brought him up to a reserve driver. Let's make this kid our second driver on the lineup for this coming year. Put that out because he is contracted with Alpine as a reserve driver, but he is not contracted with them for an F1 driver position. And so they released this announcement very quickly. We hear from Oscar Piastri that he will not be joining Alpine this coming season, that he does not have a contract with them to be a driver for the following year. And presumably he's talking to other teams. The one primary team that, of course, comes into play is McLaren, because Zach Brown, as we've talked about, scooping up drivers left and right. We've got the contract issues with, I believe it's Pato O'Ward or Alex Palou over in IndyCar, going from Chip Ganassi Racing over to McLaren. So apparently there may have been talks between Zach Brown and McLaren with Oscar Piastri to either come on as their reserve driver or whatnot. So now there's a lot of questions. Alpine doesn't have someone to fill the seat. Fernando Alonso's moving to a new team. And we're just kind of starting to shake the whole contract negotiations up. So we ended up just, I think yesterday or today, hearing that Alex Albon re-signed with Williams for another year. So he will be moving, he won't be moving. He'll be staying in that position for another year. Nick Latifi has not confirmed or said that he has a solid team yet. If staying in F1, he'd probably be with Williams, but that could potentially be a seat open. Williams is going to test a American F2 driver, Logan Sargent, at the U.S. Grand Prix in their car. So that's a potential option for a guy in F2 who's competing pretty well for the F2 championship. I think he's in like fourth or fifth, maybe.
Gotcha.
So yeah, lots of craziness with the contract negotiations.
Sure, and all kind of like bang, 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 pretty quick punches right in a row. So let's go back to Fernando Alonso, because my immediate reaction was, well, isn't that like a bit of a backslide? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say team wise, it from the outside perspective of things, it is a
Well said.
like backslide. I personally like obviously the drivers have way more information on especially as they're talking to this team or these different teams of like what teams are looking to do. I feel like Renault, when it was Renault, was like very vocal about what they were trying to do and where they were trying to get the car and everything, and like the goal was to be fighting for championships. They said that when they signed Daniel Ricciardo a few years back. They wanted to be fighting at the top of the grid for at least wins, if not championships, and they didn't do that. Then the merger with Alpine and everything kind of leaves this team in a state where I feel like I don't hear as much from them at all in news or social media. So I don't know how aggressive they're pushing for to be successful. Fernando Alonso, a two-time world champion, going to a team that has another world champion vacating a spot to retire. I think it's what Aston Martin was looking for in a driver to some extent. They wanted another veteran who can kind of continue their project forward, and then maybe Alpine just not being aggressive enough with their figuring things out. I think it is like going to a slightly worse team, like I said, with Alonso going to Aston Martin, but maybe if their trajectory is better from what the drivers are seeing, then it could end up being an improvement over the next couple of years. So it sounds like Fernando is up to drive for another couple of years potentially, so can't hurt to test it out. At this point in his career, like, I don't see any issue with it.
Well, yeah, because then the question is, like, what is he selecting for in his drive? Like, it seems really odd that he would be near the top of the table with, you know, Checo, Charles, Lando, Esteban. He's right up there with them. And then he's going to actively move to a car that every weekend is like 10 to 13. So then your question becomes very relevant is there something that they see that puts like, oh, maybe in 2 years he sees them ahead of Alpine in some way? Really risky from the way it looks now.
I think for Alonso, there's a lot less risk to Alonso than there is to Aston Martin, in my opinion, because
yeah, for sure,
they get a driver that they know is solid and can drive like any car and just go out there and put in solid, like, consistent performances and all. But
and like, I mean, aggressive performances too.
Yeah,
you know.
But if they're not able to produce a car that can allow him to be successful at all, then he's just going to be out, and then they're going to have to scramble to find or to like figure out who's next. Right. And as far as I can tell, Aston Martin doesn't have the same kind of driver programs as, I mean, obviously Red Bull and Mercedes and Ferrari have pretty large driver programs, but Williams has a driver program bringing people up. McLaren has a drivers program trying to like foster talent and things like that. Aston Martin doesn't really have that as much from what I can tell. So I think if they continue to not progress and improve, then Alonso's just gonna be gone, and then you end up kind of in the same spot. And maybe Mr. Stroll is just trying to get a good mentor for his son. This is tutor time. Bring in a couple of former world champions to give Lance the tricks of the trade, and then next thing we know, Lance Stroll world champion 2025.
Does Lawrence see it as he needs to step away as father figure and have somebody who can really, saddle up a race car? So he just like phases out as father and then have like, the new Darth Vader step in or whatever.
I mean, I think that for a team like Aston Martin, like I said, that I think they're still figuring things out. Who knows what their trajectory is going to look like, but having a driver who can drive just any car and come in and like you don't have to worry about them being like or dropping off really, like to some extent, like say Daniel Ricciardo has since he went to McLaren. Like he was doing really solidly, and since moving to McLaren just hasn't had the same success. Having a guy who can come in and you're like, yeah, he's going to be fine. He's driven Ferrari. He's driven Renault back in the 2000s. He's driven in IndyCar. He's driven for Alpine. Like, you're just like adding to the resume and being like, okay, this guy can just hop into anything and like figure out how to drive it and like drive it well. And that's a huge positive to just have that kind of guarantee almost in the back of your mind that you're like, hey, I don't have to worry about this guy. I can just let him go out and he'll perform.
Yeah, and from, like you were saying, from the Aston Martin perspective, that looks really enticing. It would just be a shame if what you're talking about happens, where he's not able to get much out of that car, and then again, they're left thinking like, well, this must be a driver issue, where it's like, well, maybe you got to look at, your engineering package or something, because if with consistently different drivers, you're just still in the same position, and your other driver also isn't getting results, I mean, what do you start looking at then?
Yeah, and I think that's the other, like, you bring up a good point, but I don't imagine that most teams or team principals, owners, anything like that, they've gotten to where they are like for a number of reasons, and I don't think one of them is to just ignore an issue. So if they are experiencing similar like struggles to get points and things like that, even with Alonso at the wheel, similarly to Seb, then I think they definitely will have confirmation that it's not a driver thing. Even Lance, I mean, we saw him put in some really solid performances in past years. It was not as consistent, but he had some nice drives a number of times with Racing Point and in the first year of Aston Martin and everything. So there's a lot of good signs, I think, for them to be like, yeah, this isn't necessarily just drivers. So I guess we'll see how they move forward, but that Alonso move started a huge chain reaction. I saw someone said on Twitter that it was like the Seb like placed the bomb somewhere, and then Fernando had like hit the trigger on it to make it explode and blow up into all these different roster moves and talks and who's going where and there and everywhere.
Well, yeah, I mean, because at a certain point, you need like one domino to move for the rest of the table to go, right?
Yeah.
There needs to be an inciting incident.
Yeah, someone's got to be the first move. So, yeah, we've gotten a lot of news, and today's Wednesday. We're 3 days into the summer break, which is we still have another 2.5 weeks or so.
Couple of spots yet to fill, so yeah, I'm sure in the coming days and weeks we'll obviously be getting a better picture of what next season's grid is going to look like.
Yeah, and sorry, 3.5 weeks. I forgot. That was wishful thinking, hoping that F1 would be back sooner.
Yeah.
So lot of interesting things. But something even more interesting before the race even happened, we get a lovely FP3 with a Nick Latifi P1. Go Tifi, running it up the grid, putting in a crazy lap right at the end as the track's like starting to dry out a little bit, putting in a solid time, going P1 and FP3 and kind of shocking everyone. We had Charles Leclerc in a Williams sandwich, Albon in P3. What were you thinking? Did you see any of that before starting to watch quali to have an idea that had just happened, or just I kind of felt unsure what to think going into quali after that, because I'm like, I don't know how the track's going to be, and these guys just put solid drives up in the wet, so if it rains again, this could be crazy.
Well, it's tough to know. I feel like that might be a case of well, if it was 2 minutes longer, everybody else would have gotten another run in, and the Williams, he was just at the front of that, batting rotation.
Yeah.
So I don't really care. So it's not oh man, is Latifi gonna mix it up on Sunday? No. There was not one piece of me that ever thought that. I was just oh, that's funny.
I mean, but yeah, I didn't necessarily have any crazy. I was maybe things will get shaken up. I didn't expect to see Latifi starting P1 on Sunday, but the other thing was there was thunderstorms called for, so I was watching the end of FP3, and there was the potential that if quali got rained out, that the starting grid would start the way that FP3 ended, and so having Latifi P1 and Checo P20, if that had happened, was at the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, that would have been a Twilight episode of Formula One.
So bizarre. But I did think there was potential for Latifi. He's had a couple of good times where he's made it out of Q1 into Q2, out of Q2 into Q3. So I was like, hey, maybe he'll do it. And then we get to qualifying, and Latifi's in P20. And that is the least surprising part of anything else that happened in qualifying. So
the most reliable runner, you might say.
Yeah, consistency.
Just consistency is what's important, man.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, Latifi starting in P20, getting out. I was bummed to see Seb out in Q1 as well. But the other kind of craziness happened a lot later in quali. So take me through Q3 and kind of how that ended up shaking out for the grid.
I think we have to grandfather in Sergio. I just want to talk about him a little bit, because there was the funny moment towards the end of Q2 where I'm not sure what exactly the confusion was, but it seemed like he went in too late for a new set, and then traffic on the track didn't allow him to get another run in. So he was held up in some way, so he didn't get another run, so he was out in Q2. I think that was important for Sunday, and a bit of an oversight, bit of a mistake from Red Bull, I would say. So unfortunate. But then in Q3, you had the Ferrari's just with so much pace, just nailing every lap, hooking it up. But from out of nowhere, right at the very end, you have George Russell on a heater of a lap, just I think he was going purple in every sector. I don't know if he was, just green or whatever. So setting fastest sector times 1, 2, and 3, and right at the very end where it was, Carlos Sainz had provisional pole. George Russell comes through right at the very end and just scoops it away from him, and that was just so fitting for what like Carlos Sainz has had to deal with this season. That yeah, man, kudos to George, but heartbreaker for Carlos.
Yeah, and the craziest part about that is just looking at the progression of like the lap times and everything. The jump from between George's lap times from Q2 to Q3, he jumped like 0.8 of a second in time. Like most other drivers are not improving by that much. Ocon improved by 0.2, Lando improved by 0.4, Leclerc by 0.2, 0.5 for Carlos. So like almost a second of time that George jumped from his Q2 to Q3 time to get pole for his first pole of it, or first pole of his F1 career, right? Or is that?
Yeah,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
pole position, but I believe the whatever it was, the Sakir Grand Prix when he stood in for Lewis Hamilton, I believe he was like P2 or P3.
He was
So
P2 in that,
near the
yeah.
top.
It
Yes.
made me think that he was, because he led the like first like 50 laps of that race or something like
Yeah.
that. So
You just like you think he started in first, but no,
right.
this weekend was the maiden pole position.
Yeah, so super exciting, especially Lewis Downs starting P7, couldn't hook it up for a lap like George did. And then Max having some engine issues and everything, dropping him back to P10, not really being able to put in any solid lap time. Even his Q2 lap time would have had him starting P4, but couldn't put it together for Q3 with the car trouble.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was the same issue that kind of reared its head on Sunday. I know he was having a little bit of, I believe Christian Horner said it was a clutch issue that he was dealing with at the start of the race. I don't know if it was something similar, but yeah, Max not able to find the pace, starting P10 for him, coming out of qualifying right in front of Sergio Perez, so at least the Red Bulls hand in hand, but not where they would want to be.
Yeah, there were lots of good memes about that.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, I saw
Oh, okay.
a bunch of funny ones from I think Umbrella Academy. There's a meme where the one guy's driving in a car going one way and looks over, and the other person's driving the other way in a car, and they look over, and it's like Max and Sergio starting next to each other on the grid, P10 and 11. It's
That's funny.
like confused to see each other right there. So definitely a bizarre start, and really a week that I think Red Bull was just kind of hoping to salvage points and try and just put something out there to not drop too many points leading into the summer break and everything halfway through the season. But from the get-go, as I was taking notes kind of as I was watching through the race and everything, I had my note out on my phone. And so my first note was that Leclerc's first pit timing. And so just like getting into the race a little bit, Leclerc, he pits relatively early after starting on the mediums. A lot of drivers starting on the softs, and I was kind of wondering why they were doing that. And then I see them put on another set of mediums onto the car, and I'm like, looking at this, I don't understand how he's gonna. I was like, there's no way he has to be doing a 2-stop. There was some talk of potential for 1-stops. I think Haas went for it a little bit with putting the hard tires on their cars. But yeah, he stopped like, so he stops at the 21st lap out of, what was it, 70 or so. And I was like, there's no way he's running these mediums to the end. A lot of the soft tire drivers were stopping around like 14 to 18, but it was just, it kind of led into a just bizarre pit strategy for Leclerc pretty early on into the race.
Yeah, and especially so if you look at the weather data, it's like the ambient temperature and the track temperature has plummeted from the conditions that it was elsewhere in the weekend. So already you're going to have like temperature issues no matter what tire you're on. So then you compound that by using the hardest compound tire for the weekend where you're just like running on ice if you're not able to get that compound up to like the running temperature. So from the perspective that the necessary information should have been had like Saturday or even Friday about the, it's likely going to be too cold to make these hard tires work at all. It was surprising to see Ferrari go for that strategy where it seemed very apparent to the other teams that that was not going to be a tire strategy that was going to win the race. I know we see the Alpines, both of them, Esteban and Fernando. I believe they did a 1-stop where they started on mediums, took the hards like like a third into the race, and just ran the hard tires to the end. But that was a total different strategy than the 2-stopper that Charles Leclerc was on, where it would have been better to do the soft start and then just use medium tires throughout the rest of the race because that was the winning compound.
Yeah, and so looking at it, I was like, oh man, he stopped only 5 laps later on the medium tires, and then when they put on another set of mediums, my first thought was, what's the weather forecast? Because I'm like, if they're trying to just like push some medium tires because they're expecting heavy rain and everything, and like they know everyone's gonna have to pit at that point for wets or intermediates or something, then like maybe I was dumb. I was giving Ferrari the benefit of the doubt in assuming that they would have some big master plan. I'm like, oh, they're trying to like push hard on mediums because they know that they're gonna end up on intermediates or wets. My note says Leclerc double mediums in case of rain? Question mark. I'm like,
that's funny. It's a hilarious note
because I'm like, why are they pitting him now and putting him on mediums again? Like, only makes it 21 laps in when the softs are making it to lap 16 or 17 or so. So I was confused.
Well, I think he was too. He was quoted in the media pen afterwards saying, we'll have to meet later, and I'll have to understand why these decisions were come to. But
and I think that was more of the second pit stop. We see him go onto the hard tires that we've seen, like you said, Alonso, Ocon. I think we saw Ricardo. We saw Kevin Magnussen of the Haas, who pitted early for those tires, and we're seeing those guys just have no ability to have any kind of pace on the hard tires. And then we see second pit stop comes around and Leclerc gets put on the hard tires. We see in the post-race, the cool-down room with Lewis, George, and Max, spoiler alert, that they're talking about it. They're watching replays, and Lewis goes, oh, they were on the hards? And George and Max were like, yeah, they were on the hards. Just casually.
At them.
No, it wasn't like this is so funny. It was more like, Yeah, we have no, like, we're laughing because we have no idea what they were thinking. Like, that's the
Right.
only reaction we can have. Um, so Charles just ends up, and the other side of that is Signs ends up with a different strategy. Like, they have the opportunity to try and, I was listening to some different conversations about this week, and one thing that was pointed out was they had the opportunity to just run them on different tire strategies. Run Signs and Leclerc doing different things. Start one on softs, start one on mediums, because then you have the potential, if Max and Checo climb through the grid, you can pit one of them early with the soft tires to do the undercut. You have the other guy do the overcut on the medium tires. And then you have a lot of potential for things in the race. And instead, we see Ferrari just like putting them on the same strategy, but not letting them utilize their tires in the same way. You're seeing Leclerc pit on lap 21, I believe, was his first pit stop, and then we don't see. I'm trying to think when, or look for, or Sainz pits on lap 17 and Charles pits on 21. Then Charles pit again before we see Carlos come in for his second pit stop. So we see Leclerc do a very short middle stint on the medium tires comparatively. And so it was just a really bizarre strategy kind of week for Ferrari.
Yeah, and especially on a Sunday where they were starting P2 and P3 and then ending up 4 and 6. Like, definitely their race to lose in that scenario. Obviously, George was on pole, so he had the best chance of winning the race. But yeah, with them being so close behind, they easily could have made moves off the start. But and carried that victory through had the tire strategy been correct. So yeah, it just seems like a bit of a fumble, bit of an oversight from Ferrari, and you have to wonder how many more of these they have in them before the season's out of their hands and Red Bull just has the run on them.
Yeah, and I mean it's a huge gap between in the drivers and constructors championships now.
Yeah.
It's really like ballooned after this past week, and I mean with the other results, another Mercedes double podium. We have Lewis and George P2, P3. Really solid drives from both of them. Like, Mercedes is now going to be quickly coming up on Ferrari in the rearview mirrors and have that potential to pass them in the constructors. Like, it might be a more of a competition for P2 in the constructors than it ends up being for P1. And that just kind of blows my mind. I mean, during the race, like, I expected Max to climb through the grid. I didn't expect him or Sergio to finish ahead of Leclerc or Sainz. Max was kind of just cruising through and eventually, like, just blows past Leclerc on the medium tires at the end while Leclerc's on the hard tires. And at that point, I was just like, man, like, this is a rough day for Ferrari, good day for Max and Red Bull. Checo had a nice recovery drive too, getting up to P5. That was about, I feel like, the best we could have expected from him at that point. I feel like I feel like Checo's a known quantity at this point. Like, we know that he is a good driver and a pretty consistent driver overall, but he just doesn't quite have the same skill set as Max when it comes to, like, climbing through the traffic or just, like, in general. He's a very good driver, very Valtteri to Lewis in a way. slightly lesser. More props to Valtteri. He was closer for a lot longer, but a nice drive from him. But Lewis and George had a great weekend. George with the podium along with the pole position. I've been very impressed by Mercedes improving up until this point at the midway point of the season.
Yeah, and it seems like they have had the sharpest performance increases. We know that they struggled during Fridays and Saturdays, but would come back on the Sundays and have decent to good pace where they wouldn't be like too far out of contention for at least just a good race for them. But now we're seeing pretty large gains week in to week out where now we're just seeing Lewis and George back to back weekends up on the podium, and I think having things gone just a touch differently, this could have been a Lewis Hamilton victory. You know, just as easily as, interestingly enough, as Max got the victory today. I think
Mm-hmm.
Lewis could have had it as well. So yeah, Mercedes is quite impressive. It shows not only can they defend from the top, but have they're navigating in a way where they are significantly on the rise. And that's fun to watch and quite impressive because, yeah, that was a mega drive from Lewis and George.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at just like some of these stats, Lewis has podium now in five races in a row.
Yep.
P3 in Canada, P3 at Silverstone, P3 in Austria, P2 in France, P2 in Hungary. He's putting out some crazy drives once Mercedes kind of figured out their issues and, like you said, has just been able to figure it out as a team and propel the team in this upward trajectory. Like Lewis being a fantastic driver has been like able to go, hey, we have a car that can drive decently now. Let me just put it up on the podium. He's not quite there where he's in the fight for P1s and race wins, but he is getting ever closer. With this podium this past week, he now has more podiums than Charles Leclerc this season, which blows my mind. He
Yeah.
has 6 podiums now to Charles having 5. Charles, of course, has some wins this year, but I thought that was just a shocking stat when I saw it. I was like, how is that possible that Lewis now has podium more than Leclerc with the car that Leclerc has under him?
Long seasons, man. And that's what's crazy. Whereas, like, if it was an 8 race season, like I'm sure it was at some point, it would have been Ferraris. You go long enough, and then the tides change. It's just an interesting thing.
It is. It's pretty. I mean, I know things fluctuate a lot, but I think the consistent thing with Ferrari this season, unfortunately, has just been bad strategy and bad kind of team calls and everything.
And it
Carlos,
doesn't help when you have a fireball every now and again.
yeah, I mean that definitely hurts as well. But if you're going to be a top team, especially in a season where you have all these new regulations, you got to kind of expect for there to be some bumps in the road with the engines and things like that. But the thing is, if you're going to be successful at the top of F1, is you have to get the strategies right. And like Ferrari, I would say any weekend that they have had to come up with some sort of different strategy or a successful strategy to win, where it's not just, oh, they were faster at this track, or oh, like this other team was not quite there, had a bad race, or had a DNF or something. Those races, they're still having bad strategy, and they're not having having that piece of the puzzle together. I mean, last year in the title fight between Mercedes and Red Bull, we saw that there were a number of races that were decided just because one team like did something tricky and beat out the other team with strategy by these slight margins. Whereas this year we're just seeing Ferrari go, yeah, we have a great car. We're going to drive up there. We're going to get pole position. And then we're going to just like send our driver out on hard tires that suck, that we know suck because of every other driver who's been on them this race, and go, oops, the car wasn't good enough this week. Like Mattia Binotto was like, this is the first race this season where the car just wasn't quite there to compete. And it's like, no, it was definitely there. Mm-hmm. You just didn't plan well or figure out a good way to drive this race this weekend. He's like, oh yeah, like 12 out of 13 races having a car that competes for, that's like looking really good, is this is the first race where the car just wasn't there. And it's like, no, if the car's been there for 12 other races this season to compete for these wins, it's there today and you just messed up. Like, that's...
Yeah, and then it seems like he just doesn't want to, like, put that out, just blame it on the car. The car didn't eat its Wheaties.
Yeah, exactly. Just needed a little extra, like, buff on the bumper to just get that aerodynamic just right. So it's...
a little bit of dirt.
It's disappointing to see with the Ferraris not having this. And I think it's more disappointing because I think Carlos and Charles are really great drivers. I think that, like, it would be a lot more exciting and more fun and entertaining to see them on optimal strategies that are going to, like, have competition. I mean, we now have just kind of keep ending up with races where the front driver on the grid or top couple drivers just don't get much time because they're just like out there doing their thing in no man's land because the competition is just has these gaps, especially when drivers have engine blowups or bad strategy, much larger gaps.
Well, and even to the degree that Max can do a good old 360 no scope there in the middle of the race and still bring it home.
Yeah,
obviously that's like the thing everybody's dying to comment on, but that was hilarious.
Oh, it was ridiculous. Like, that is, if I had told you earlier in the season, like at the Hungarian Grand Prix, Max is going to be passing Charles. He's going to get past him. You're going to be like, okay, like, this is pretty logical. And I'm going to go, then he's going to do a 360 spin, flat spot his tires, and Leclerc's going to get past him. And you're like, okay, this, like, could happen. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and then Max is going to beat Charles by, like, 30 seconds. You'd be like, wait, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah, you're right. That would not make any sense.
Like, the just logic behind it is crazy. Max, like, goes for a spin, just keeps pushing through it, has a great race, P10 to P1. It was just a kind of weird race overall. Like, we have that going on. I will say I was excited when Lewis passed Carlos towards the, like, as we're getting towards the end, the Toto fist pump on the screen as he's got his jacket, like, tied around his neck like he's wearing an ascot like Fred from Scooby-Doo. I'm like, yeah. But seeing Toto, like, getting into it, I was like, it's like, man, I do kind of miss it from the past few years. Not as much Toto content.
Well, yeah, but I will say this about Mr. Toto Wolff is, if you go back and watch the races from last year, like end of the year 2021, my man is like, he is like stone. He's got no
Yeah.
smiles. There's like growl in his voice. He looks like exhausted. But contrasted with this, when he is doing interviews, it's amazing how like soft his face is now. He's smiling a lot more.
It's a
There's like
refreshed Toto. We got Toto after a nice vacation.
I don't necessarily care about that. I don't care. What is interesting is how much pressure weighs on a person like that to where it is visible, and then you see that pressure lifted, and also that is like just as noticeable. It's
Oh yeah.
crazy. Like even Sarah at the end of last year, she was just like, damn, he looks this and he looks that, blah blah blah. And the whole time I'm like, of course, he's like fighting this crazy war that
Yeah.
like, is like going so whatever. But it's refreshing, to your point, to see Toto back and to see him like not as
Well, that's what I
fucking
mean. Like,
battle hardened as last year, dude. It was like, man,
well, that's
unhappy people.
yeah, that's what I mean. Like Toto after vacation, he's like, I think the fact that like 8 years in a row of winning the constructors championship and having Ferrari and Red Bull back and forth trying to like go get after you and like do all these things, um, to finally have a season where you can just be like, okay, we're working on improvements. We are where we are. There's not like this pressure, like you said, of everything else. Like, he hasn't had a season like that in a long time. Um, like, it was just fucking stone cold Toto until Constructors Championship was won, and then he could relax. So we're still at least seeing 3/4 of the season of him being like this intense person, and now he seems like, okay, like we're improving. Improving is good. I'm like happy with that, and that's progress. And like you're seeing a different kind of guy, which is. It's refreshing. It's nice. I'm sure he feels good because he's clearly like exuding that. But yeah, I was excited to see Toto having that a nice positive, the fist pump, the emotion, getting into it a bit as Lewis was going by Carlos. Towards the end of the race, I was a little like. I was getting a little annoyed with the broadcast because there's 2 laps to go after the virtual safety car with Valtteri, and
Yeah.
they're like, Lewis is 10 seconds back from Max. Maybe he can make that up in 2 laps time while they're both on like medium tires. And I was like, what are these announcers talking about? And they're like, oh, like 1 lap to go and he's only 8.5 seconds back. He could make a run at it if there's a little rain. And I'm like, what are you guys talking about? It was like they were trying to drum up excitement right at the end of the race. It was kind of bizarre to me. Like, they were talking like this rain was going to close the gap by 10 seconds in 2 laps. And I'm like, Lewis isn't on intermediates. Like, if it rains, Lewis is going to struggle just as much as Max is going to. I'm like, what are you guys talking about?
Right.
It was
I'm not even sure I picked up on that.
It was a weird ending. I picked up on it because I was like looking at the times. I'm like, oh, Max is cruising to a victory, like all good. And they're like, oh, there might be rain. Like, oh, Max could lose 10 seconds in 2 laps. And I'm like, wait, hold on. Like, what did you guys just say? This is bizarre. I mean, the broadcast in general is good, but I was like,
It's just a weird talking point for the end.
no need to like drum up excitement like that. Talk about Max going P10 to P1 and like the excitement that is. Talk about like the other like Mercedes on the upswing, getting another double podium or like in that position at that point. I'm like, there are other things to talk about. It was a weird one for me, but that's maybe I noticed that and it wasn't as glaring as I thought it was.
Well, it was glaring, maybe not, because yeah, you can't just have your announcers at the end just like, well, yeah, this is just done for sure. Maybe they are incentivized to look for any out for someone, towards the end. You even see casters do it where like you'll see them hold the and EDG wins the game until like the Nexus literally explodes, where you'll hear them just like start pulling things out until you see like the confirmed thing. Overall, that's just like devil's advocate, but yeah, that's kind of an odd point.
Yeah, it was a little strange, but overall, like, good race. Lando had a solid finish as well. He's someone who we didn't really mention too much. He was just kind of also in no man's land. He was like 60 seconds back from Charles, but was the like only person or the highest person on the grid that didn't get lapped by anyone. So probably a weird drive for him, but we see Alonso and Ocon getting the points. We get Seb getting a point in his first race after announcing his retirement and all. So just overall, I guess there any other notes that you wanted to kind of get to with the race? We had the Daniel Ricciardo double overtake, which was exciting just for him to finish in P15.
Yeah, super sick.
So it was cool at the moment, and then after the finish of the race, I was like, it didn't really do that much, but yeah, just
shows us he can still get it done.
Can make those the late breaking. He is
the
still
last of the late breakers.
He is still the last of the late breakers.
I'm gonna be making that joke until we're old and decrepit. Episode 1000 of the Talent.
Good. I hope so.
Yeah.
Daniel Ricciardo will always be the last of the late breakers.
I'm curious if there will be a point where they can like bring that terminology back in, where like people will have forgotten about that being a thing, and then they can just bring it back to the broadcast.
Well, and we'll be the old heads that are like, no!
Daniel Ricciardo was the last of the late breakers.
Have you forgotten?
Yeah, exactly.
Danny Ricks.
Holy shit, that'd be so funny if they're like, oh, we can start calling them late breakers again. Oh, has it been 5 years? Yes, it has. I don't know. That was dumb.
We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised. We'll see. No, I wouldn't be surprised if down the line, like, we're sitting here and we're like, yo, this is the same thing that they said about XYZ driver. Like, there's gonna be people that were like, oh, like, there's 100% going to be another Mazda spin. There's going to be another guy who gets the, like, that they're like, oh, Roman Grosjean always crashes into everything. There's going to be another, oh, Latifi, consistent P20. Like, well, I think we'll have some of those experiences in our time. So you never know when it comes to those kinds of things.
Yes, just patterns in the world repeating themselves, and here we are, just to bear witness.
Yeah, the later the breakers, the longer the last of the late breakers goes. I don't know. I started saying it in
words to live by right there.
Yeah, that just got away from me. So just to wrap up F1, we had the mid-season break. We've got the drivers' standings. Max in P1, 80 points up on Charles Leclerc at this point, so more than 3 races up. We have Leclerc in P2, Checo is only 5 points back from Leclerc in P3. George Russell has passed Carlos Sainz into P4, so he is up there. And Lewis Hamilton's 10 points back from Carlos in P6. So that top six from Charles in P2 down to Lewis in P6 is a very close 32-point gap. Looking at the constructors, we've got Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes only 30 points back from Ferrari at this point. Alpine and McLaren still in a tight fight. And then towards the bottom of the grid, we've got Alfa Romeo, Haas, Alfa Tauri, Aston Martin, and Williams.
Mm-hmm.
So thought I would give a brief recap before we move along from F1 to the League of Legends this week.
Yeah, for sure. Now, do you want to start over in the NALCS, cover the two games that we have here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the best place to start. We'll get to more of the excitement as we go. So first game of the week, we had the Evil Geniuses versus FlyQuest game. The two games we picked were back-to-back, but what were your thoughts going into that? I think I expected FlyQuest to put up a little fight, but EG has looked so good so far this season that I just obviously I think they were the favorite in the matchup.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Just like looking at the pick and ban at the start of the match, the only like red flag curiosity kind of like odd thing was I was just interested to see the impact of Alistar in this match, where obviously for Aphromoo, Alistar is a pretty big comfort pick, I don't want to say revolutionized, but we know Alistar as a very strong pick for Aphromoo, big playmaking champion, big playmaking player for the team. So seeing that they picked Alistar, it seemed like they wanted to make a lot of big moves in the bottom lane, have just a really solid engage option in that big beef ball. But it seemed like the Callista and Renata was a decent answer to something like that. But yeah, just from pick and ban, that was like the one thing that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, I think the other part that stood out to me was the Aatrox versus Sejuani top lane. I know we've started to see that a little bit more, but the Aatrox has not been as common in the top lane. We see some target bans. We see the Gwen get banned out. We see the Gangplank and the Gnar get banned out. So kind of falling down to more of comfort picks or kind of even matchups potentially there with the Sejuani and the Aatrox. But I definitely agree. I think the Renata and the Callista was a good counter. Having the double range against Aphelios doesn't have crazy range early on with most of his guns, and then the Alistar, you only have your headbutt pulverize every so often. So the kind of pressure that you can get on the bottom lane, you can really push that with the Wukong. It worked really well with Inspired. He was able to kind of push pressure around the map pretty well. But I will say I did like FlyQuest's comp. I thought that they had some solid picks in terms of trying to put themselves in a position to snowball. They basically said, hey, if we can get some early leads in the 1v1s, the Aatrox Sejuani, the Akali versus Azir. I think if those lanes had been able to get some early leads, then they would have had the ability to allow Johnson and Aphromoo to scale, kind of surpass that Callista and Renata kind of strength early in the game with the double range matchup, but they just weren't able to really get too much going in the mid or top lane to kind of push those potential like advantages. I think it was a kind of feast or famine draft a little bit, because once you get behind with the Akali, she's just not going to have enough damage to blow any single champion up, which is going to be a huge issue because you need her to be able to at least solo kill someone. The Lee Sin getting behind a little bit, and then the Aatrox, like you have all this go in and blow someone up potential, but once you get outscaled from getting behind, you just kind of in a bad spot. So it kind of went the way that I expected it to after that early game.
Oh yeah, definitely. Obviously, Evil Geniuses is quite aggressive. They pick to play like that. They are comfortable at fighting you, comfortable with fighting you at every turn they can. So yeah, not surprising that they were able to, end up taking the game. But the thing that was interesting is the 7-0 from Inspired played a great Wukong game. There was even that moment where we see Jose Diodo taking the bad trade against Inspired, just straight up 1v1 in the jungle.
He's like, oh, I got this, man. Like, I caught you out. And it's like,
definitely not. He kind of called himself.
Call an ambulance, but not for me.
Yeah, it was not pretty. Not pretty at all. So I don't know if that was like a misread or whatever, but yeah, it was just kind of odd. And then there was some weird like turret trades and cross map trades that seemed like they were okay in the favor of FlyQuest. But if you looked like 2 minutes down the line, it was like, oh, okay, EG was actually setting up to get in position for this and blah, blah, blah. So they were just playing the macro game better, too. Like, it was not that difficult once the ball got rolling for them to just start taking these fights pretty handily.
Yeah, and I think it does kind of start to show a little bit of the almost fall off after TL in the LCS, because like FlyQuest, they're 7-6, they're only a game back from C9, CLG, and TL, but the kind of like gameplay and the setup and things like that definitely does not match up to like 100 Thieves and EG once you're getting down to FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, TSM, those teams on the in the rankings. So like I said, was not shocked that EG ended up winning the matchup, but I think, initially expect FlyQuest to hang into it a little bit longer, put up a little bit better of a fight. And unfortunately, with the best of ones, that's kind of all we get. We get to see FlyQuest just kind of get beat out in the early game and then quickly run over by EG, pushing advantages very, very well around the map and having this very strong macro game. But I do wish we had best of twos or best of threes to be able to have the NALCS or the LCS kind of see if there's a little more back and forth between these teams. Best of ones just don't quite speak to it like I would like to.
Yeah, and then especially because things change week to week, or like, every couple of weeks, when you do see them then like, oh, the second game of their long drawn out, whatever best of two, because they do double round robin or whatever it is over the course of 2 splits or whatever, you see them play each other like 3 times. You have these weird impressions of what that matchup looks like. Where if you see, KT versus Africa Freaks do three game series over the course of whatever, it's like, oh, okay, we know kind of what that's gonna look like. We know what bands they're gonna get rid of and blah blah blah. So yeah, it would be interesting. But I think if I understand correctly, I think NALCS has like dwindling viewership compared to some of the other regions. So if you can't even get people to watch 5 games. How are you gonna get them to watch 10 games of the same shitty teams?
Well, I mean,
But,
I guess it's what you're looking for in terms of viewership. Like,
right.
it, hey, like, I mean, the LPL and LCK have other matchups going on throughout the week, but if it's a bad matchup, like, they have it earlier on in the week, or if it's less interesting, they don't put it in the prime time spots. Like,
Right.
LCS
What
could.
is prime time for streaming? Like, is it still like the evening hours, like when people are home from work?
I
Is that
mean,
what's considered?
well, so if LCS had like a longer schedule, say LCS had games Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and they had like two best of threes a night or something like that. I would imagine that like Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon are probably like prime time kind of times.
Sure.
But I mean, getting kind of into the next matchup that we had, the Team Liquid versus Cloud9, that would have been a banger of a best of 3 series. I mean,
Agreed.
we had a really, really exciting matchup, very back and forth in that game. We see C9 take advantages early in the bot lane while Fudge is getting solo killed in the top lane. And that kind of starts off initially this kind of back and forth where Cloud9 got the pressure early in the bot lane and then has to recover on the top side of the map a bit to kind of make up for the fact that Fudge is just getting bullied to some extent by TL in the top lane. And now at that point, Berserker and Sven can fend for themselves after getting the 2-kill advantage in the bot lane.
Yeah, I think what was most interesting, starting from the pick and ban, my first note is that I do not like the Kog'Maw with just one piece of protection. So just the Lulu does not a Juggermaw make. And on top of that, when you want to have the move speed buff on either your Wukong or your Olaf running at the carries of the enemy team, that's one less buff or ability that you'll be able to put on the Kog'Maw to help him reposition. So effectively, it felt like effectively the Kog'Maw felt really out of place. Like, I don't mind the Lulu, but I don't think you were supposed to pick the Ahri if you were going to go, with Kog'Maw. Obviously, the Zillion got banned out. Zillion would have been a great, Lulu Zillion for the Kog'Maw. I mean, that would have been a disgusting amount of movement speed for him. He was always going to be safe. So it does get banned out in that second rotation, I understand. But maybe there is another option that you could go for to get him a little more protection. Galio would be fine. You don't get the buff attacks like any steroid aspect, but you give him safety.
Yeah, my thought process is one, like if you have a Galio, you have the potential to have the Galio ultimate in from a good distance. You get the knock-up. You could potentially use the Lulu ultimate on him again for another knock-up. You have the taunt that allows you as Galio to kind of let the Kog'Maw free hit for a bit as well that way. Yeah. So there you have the dash that knocks people up as well. So like you have a lot of tools with a Galio. Galio will lose out to Azir late game in terms of like damage and everything, but if you're putting your eggs in the Han Sama basket and the Kog Lulu, like you said, it needs something else. Like Bjergsen played great on the Ahri.
Yeah, it looked really good.
It looked awesome. But in the team comp, like even having the Olaf there, I think is a great fit, but I would say in the jungle instead of in the top lane, and then having a different top laner would have been more ideal for me because the Olaf, you can disrupt the bot lane a lot more consistently to be able to put that pressure on and get that Cog Lulu out of the danger zone of the early game, really.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would agree. So yeah, it just seemed really odd. But yeah, overall there was like just back and forth to a certain degree. I think there was some like missed opportunity from Whippo. I think Fudge got off a little easy. He was kind of let into the early game a little bit by the way Blippo was playing like the real early levels. So I think Blippo it seemed like he would have been able to build a more significant advantage. Whether right or wrong, whether that wins them the game or not, I don't think so. But just interesting to see where he does have this significant advantage just based on champions that for a time Fudge was like out CSing him and kind of keeping the wave off the turret and saying like, hey, you're actually gonna do what I want you to here for a little bit before the kills start rolling in.
Yeah, and I definitely think that Blippo could have pushed that advantage harder. He got the advantage early. Santorin helped him to get that lead in the top lane.
Yeah.
And he really didn't, I think, manage waves well to leave himself in a position to continually like kind of pressure the Gwen and Fudge. Ending up where Fudge is kind of free farming is just not where you want to be with that advantage or free farming under turret really, because the Gwen does that pretty solidly. There was some pretty good just objective control from C9 as well. I felt like they had some good pressure to get the early dragons. Blabber was really zoning off the carries, and we saw that later in the game as well, when Hans was, or no, sorry, mixing myself up. Blabber is kind of pushing people off of the dragon earlier on in the matchup using the ultimate well and kind of going in. We see him zoning off people around the Dragon Soul later on. But he pressured like the right parts of the map pretty well throughout the game. And then C9 with the objective control on the Dragon, getting the early sneak Baron that really, I think, kind of started to turn the tables a little more heavily towards Cloud9's side.
Yeah, but even after that, there were a couple of fights where the Cogmaw, was in that mid game 2-item power spike where the Blabber on Hecarim running at him was just getting shredded alive. There was so much CC that he had to run through that the Kog'Maw was just melting him. So there were some fights that it seemed like if gone awry, Cloud9 was definitely losing them to the power of Kog'Maw because some of those engages were quite sloppy towards that like mid to like late game. The game is dead even at 20 minutes, and then once the Baron spawns, you get closer to the Cloud Soul, or not Cloud Soul, just the Soul Point. I don't remember what dragon it was, but yeah, it gets really tough to win those fights, and it actually took a lot from C9 to find the right fight that got them onto the carries for them to be able to actually win the game. It looked like TL was going to have a good amount of options to keep that fight off of Hans, even just having the Lulu, but it ended up not being enough, and they were able to break down through their defenses.
Yeah, well, and speaking to that a bit more, like Cloud9, like you said, they were able to get the Dragon Soul, but then they go to that Baron. They take the Baron and then get almost completely wiped. I think they killed one member of TL and end up with just Jensen left on the map to kind of wave clear temporarily with the Baron for everyone to respawn. It was really fortunate that that Cloud9 was still able to kind of hold things off at that point, because TL could have very easily potentially run through and just ended the game if Jensen had died there. but then we kind of saw the pressure that Cloud9 had around the map turning into more successes down the road. We see going to the Elder Dragon fight, they have the advantage, and they're there first. They have the setup and everything for that Elder Dragon. And really what ends the game is Fudge hiding in the blue buff pit there because Cloud9 is pulling everyone in, and then him hopping that wall with the Gwen, not Glenn, and soloing out Kog'Maw and Hansama pretty quickly right there.
He teleported to that ward.
And then just sat there and waited and sees everyone coming through. And he's like, oh, the Kog'Maw's alone. I'm hopping this wall. Blows him up pretty quickly. Cloud9's able to then take the Baron and then just end the game. So it was a really impressive game from both sides. I think they both rolled with the punches pretty well and were able to adjust their strategies. But Cloud9 ended up just being able to take the advantages around the map a little bit better with their macro play and objective control to end up bringing the win home.
Well, and then it was a really surgical neutral objective setup that gave them the angle on the big carry, which is just always fun. While yes, it is decisive, that is satisfying in its own respect. Even after such a back and forth game where I think both teams had tools for victory.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, really exciting game. I think it was quite the marquee matchup. If I understood correctly, this was the first time the full real 2022 rosters were up against each other. So it was super exciting, and we actually saw some pretty high level gameplay. Obviously, sprinkle with nostalgia because these are all players that I know the name of, and don't make me feel like I'm 100.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about high level gameplay, let's move over to the LCK. We had T1 Gen G. We have a big, just heavy hitting matchup with T1 and Gen G, and from the get go, I was kind of just surprised a little bit from the draft phase. We see some just different bans. We've talked about how we are not big fans of the Vi. We see the Vi get banned out. We see Singed get banned out against Doran. So potentially something there with the Singed that maybe is coming up in different scrims and whatnot. But we also see the Skarner come out and the Nocturne, which are not really the typical junglers that we've been seeing lately. So from the start, it's kind of an interesting draft.
Yeah, and from the T1 side, you get the double global with the Nocturne and the Twisted Fate. I think that's dope. You get the answer from Chovy with the Silas to grab the Twisted Fate alt, get a little bit of mobile map pressure. I think that was a great answer from Gen G. You have the focus on this Nami Lucian lane that just gets disgustingly strong. We saw Ruler play it to a beautiful degree. But yeah, to your point, the Peanut Skarner was quite interesting. 007 just impaled a whole lot of people. And it really worked for the comp. Well, I thought it was pretty cool.
It was really solid in the comp, and I think the clinching point of that game was when they're able to use the Skarner in the bot side to get the pick on Zeus, kill the Gwen early without any other fight going on, and Skarner still has the impale up. He didn't have to use it at all to get the pick on the Gwen. And so at that point, you're in a 5v4. You have an ultimate that's going to just lock someone down to the point that your Akali, Sylas, Lucian, Nami are just going to nuke it to the ground. And that was kind of the point, but they played around that super, super well. I did feel like Zeus was overextending a little bit in a couple of instances, and so I felt like he could have probably played a little more conservatively, but as the Gwen, you do have to have that aggressive kind of nature to you to hopefully like get some advantages, win 1v1s, because that is where your power kind of is. But then going into game 2 after Genji wins, that was just a whole different story. The Nami Lucian in the bot lane for T1 just really couldn't quite get to the same point that Genji had it to in game 1.
Yeah, not at all. And just the interesting point, and this was a little bit kind of like what felt like the story of both games, is T1 gets advantage early, cannot overcome the scaling and late game teamwork, and then they just end up losing, come 35 minutes or whatever after the after some scaling. Like Chovy's CS numbers were insane that whole game. He was such a powerhouse in game 1. And then going into game 2, it felt like T1 had some advantages as well in the early game, up in gold, having some CS leads. But yeah, ending up not mattering once you get to that mid and late game. It feels like Genji just really knows what to do once those neutral objectives start being traded and towers start dropping. Genji is just getting the most out of it, and they close it out in like 10 less minutes or whatever. So it was even more of a victory for Genji there in game 2.
Yeah, and Peanut played kind of the same style, like Poppy, go around, just cause mayhem, CC people, and really put your other lanes in the lead. And with Ruler and Lehens in the bot lane for Genji, Ruler, when he gets that team fight in mid lane at, I don't know, it was maybe 15 minutes or so, and is able to get the pentakill. From that point, just the protection that he had between Ari Charms and the Poppy, like everyone, the Lulu right there, to be able to give him all of the different boosts and speed boost shields, everything else. From that point, it just felt like every fight was very quickly like, oh, Ruler didn't die. Okay, T1 loses the fight. Oh, okay, now they lose this objective, that objective, and the other. So quickly closing it out from Genji's side, which is what we've kind of talked about with like some of the best teams, is getting those advantages and being able to consistently push them to kind of take those leads and propel them forward. Genji now is up in first in the LCK Summer Standings after that win, taking T1 down to 12-2 record. So really impressive from them to and also just in their matchups against T1 go 2-0 and have the leg up on them there.
Yeah, very impressive game. I thought there was a hilarious moment.
Sorry, they went 1-1 in their matchups, so sorry. Correcting myself.
Oh, I thought you were just talking about that match itself.
I was talking about in the two matchups. I was looking at the standings, and I thought I had read that Genji had gone 2-0, but
right, like they're head to head.
Yeah,
gotcha.
So, but yes, 2-0 in this series as well.
Yeah. GG's to Genji. I thought there was a hilarious moment in the bottom lane where they had Peanut come and just ult the two bottom laners of T1 away from the turret just so they could get the turret plates. And I was just dying in my head of just like, we just want your plates, go away. We just want your plates.
That
I was gonna
just
start. Go ahead.
no, it's just such a kind of heads up like move to just be like, nah, we don't want to fight right now. Bye. Like,
Yeah, well, you're gonna get more gold by like punting them away than like trying to kill them or whatever. So yeah, no, I definitely agree. It was just fucking hilarious. But yeah, so that was the LCK game 2-1 versus Genji, 2-0 to Genji. Let us move on to we had a bit of a good series over in LPL, I might say. It was RNG versus JD Gaming. Um, how'd you like it?
it was a good matchup. I mean, we're seeing some different picks in the top lane, which was kind of cool. We see more, I guess, different in terms of what the current meta is. We're seeing in game one, JDG had the Sejuani come out versus the Gnar. We're seeing Breathe just like go after the Gnar in game one and game two, where the Kennen counter pick ends up coming out in games 2 and 3 versus the Gnar. But I mean, really good matchups. You have the Twisted Fate and the Rise in the mid lane, both who can push pretty well and have the kind of global ultimates and everything. It started out pretty strong with game one.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say so. It's interesting that both teams in the pick and ban, like you had mentioned, were focused on the global alts for their mid laners, but both choosing extremely aggressive junglers. It seemed like JDG picked strong engage and some good team fighting options, whereas it felt like RNG was able to create more like skirmishes and maybe get some picks, hope for 4v5 scenarios. So teams kind of selecting for different things, but making sure that they're getting really solid picks in each of their roles. So yeah, I would definitely agree. The game one was quite exciting in that regard.
Yeah, and you have Hope and Missing in the with the Lushinami, like we've talked about in both the LCS games that or both of the Gen G T1 games. I mean, that combination just looks really strong in the bot lane right now. And they were able to kind of utilize the lead that they were able to get in the bot lane to kind of press their advantages and all. Like you said, with the aggressive junglers, the Wukong has just looked really good, and Kanavi looked phenomenal on it throughout the game. And the Sejuani did kind of what you want it to. It turns into a big tank and then ends up being just crowd control using the ultimate to get picks and advantages and start off team fights and everything. So that's kind of the Sejuani that we have been, or I think that teams are looking to get, that we don't typically see it get to that point because it just ends up losing lane too much to be able to kind of scale into this late game tank ult bot that it ends up being for JDG.
Yeah, but it is insanely useful. I think the kit on Sedge is just uh up I want to use the word oppressive in the sense of like the, able to cause a lot of disruption in the team fights often, like being able to get the stuns down, being able to get the dashes down.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's nice when you get to see those later game focus picks come through and be able to hit those power points. The one element that I wanted to touch on was the amount that it felt like Gala had to be flashing forward, putting himself in a position that was like extremely dangerous in the like mid to late game, where it was him like getting a tag, flashing forward, activating the stun, dying, just so he gets the enemy team to turn around on him, and then so RNG can follow up. It was an interesting strategy to say the least, and ended up, I think he just got hosed one too many times, and when you don't have your AD carry there to put out the consistent damage, that's not going to end up working for you in those late game team fights, especially when Hope with his Infinity Edge, his Gale Force, and his Rapid Fire Cannon, he is chunking people
Oh yeah.
with the ult, the Qs, the auto attacks. So yeah, just interesting game plan from Gala.
Well, and the other thing with that is like the like you said, the aggressive flashing in and all. He has other teammates who should be able to get him opportunities to kind of just sit there and put out damage in team fights. He shouldn't be having to do that. You have a Nautilus, you have a Gnar. Like, those are two champions that, if they are not able to get you as the AD carry opportunities to sit on the outside and hit people, then like that is a full failure of those players in the team fight aspect of the game. Because if you're in a position as the AD carry that flashing in to try and like kill someone is your only hope of like starting off a team fight well, when you have these big tanky team fight starters, that's a issue.
Yeah, I think my kind of last point on game one that I thought was useful to take note of is how much JD Gaming was looking to fight in the tight chokes and passages of the jungle, and they did it exceptionally well, where all of the AoE was going to be hitting most of the members of RNG for the duration of the spellcast, where you have that great moment in I think they call it the banana brush, like right outside of Dragon Pit, where everybody of RNG just funnels in to that one little choke. JD Gaming gets all their damage down, all their AoE, and the whole team just melts. So it was interesting to see like RNG have so much pressure until they just funneled into these little chokes, and JD Gaming just decimated them. There was one on red side, red jungle, so that like top right quadrant, and then there was one down at the dragon that just sealed it up. It was just 5 members of RNG just tunnel visioning towards JD Gaming, and they just sweeped it up. So it was fun to see JD Gaming pick their fights well and then execute.
Yeah, and then going into game 2, kind of from the other side, RNG executing their team comp very, very well. I mean, they get leads really all across the map. Breathe is able to get good advantages in the top lane, with Wei kind of moving around really well on the map. Gala and Ming just getting so far ahead in the bottom lane, to the point that Hope and Missing were really not able to be productive or constructive at all, for kind of the aggressive team comp that you're kind of going for with the Kennen, the Silas, and the Wukong. Like, you're looking for those opportunities to be ahead and kind of wombo combo the other team in team fights, and just getting behind in every lane. They weren't able to push any advantage really, and kind of get stomped pretty heavily on dragon control and just across the map by RNG in game 2.
Yeah, and there was some advantage in the early game from JD Gaming. They had some pressure, like you said, with some of the stronger lanes, but RNG was definitely able to keep their CS numbers up, keep their deaths down, to the degree that JD Gaming wasn't able to get any like excess flowing gold into their pockets to like really balloon the lead that they had a bit of in the early game. And then after a certain point, RNG was able to capitalize. There was the one moment where Yagal TP'd in kind of unceremoniously. They were able to get the kill there, and just push moments like that and accrue these small advantages where they were end up able to come out and take the victory here in game 2, push it to a game 3.
Yeah, and that's I think what we're seeing with some of these teams and really all the different regions of getting advantages and then being able to push those through to victory, and like being able to successfully like push advantages forward. We saw it in the Gen G T1 series. Gen G, once they had those advantages and got those little increments, was able to push it through to the 2-0. And we kind of see RNG being able to do that pretty well here as well. Going again with the Silas Azir matchup, kind of on the other side, and seeing Xiaohu being able to utilize the Azir ults and kind of just create opportunities later on in the game. Again, with the aggressive jungler from Wei for RNG being able to, with the Wukong, kind of push the map around. Really, still like competitive game 3, but RNG was able to push those advantages forward.
Yeah, big time. And game 3 was categorically slower than the other ones. I don't think we had first blood until I think it was like 12, 13 minutes or so. So a much longer game. There was a point where it really felt like nothing was happening, where the camera was focused on top lane, and I just saw 2 yellow bar Yordles kind of dodging back and forth. I was like, wait, there's 2 Nars? And I was so confused, and so that just goes to show how slow the early game was, where I was just getting these champions confused. But yeah, once the kind of kills started rolling in, then it ended up finishing up rather quickly after that. But yeah, there was like a solid 15 minutes where literally nothing was happening.
Yeah, and those you kind of, as a like outsider, you kind of wonder what's going on with the teams on the inside at that point, because there's just
Probably
really
very intense comms. Truly.
I mean, yeah, but you just kind of wonder, because there's so much that they have to be like prepping for, or trying to figure out, because there is this just like sometimes in games a natural lull because objectives are not available, or this or that, or like you're waiting, both teams are waiting to hit an item break point, and they're trying to figure that out, and so you're in this kind of no man's land to some extent, until you're like, okay, this is the thing I've been waiting for. Now we have to put this plan that, like you said, for 15 minutes we've been kind of trying to get into action. Now we get to make things happen. So
yeah, there was a pretty strong moment at the end where I think Gala could have gotten a lot done towards the end of the game. There was a fight around the bottom lane turret with the little triangle wall where Gala flashed over to try and get a bunch of damage down. He immediately gets stuffed by missing with an exhaust and a bubble on top of him. And even plays like that were not enough to keep RNG from taking the dub. So it was evident that they were playing at quite a high level, making mistakes like that and still being able to win. It's very similar to Max.
Yeah, sometimes and this just ended up being their day. I think JDG played really well, and like we said, a very competitive series, but RNG was able to still have some slip ups and be successful, and win that series 2-1 in the best of 3.
Yeah, and I would say one of the more exciting matchups here for the weekend. And yeah, I think it really delivered. And seeing what was the top of the table, obviously JD Gaming was doing really well. To see RNG take that series is pretty sweet. Um, so I think for the coming LPL, we're gonna have like looking forward to the playoffs. I think we're gonna have some like really interesting playoff matches. If this is what we're getting just in like regular season games, I'm really looking forward to what these guys are gonna deliver coming into playoffs.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we have RNG, who is the third seed, beating the top seed of JDG. Those top four are all very close, I feel like, in terms of their levels and competition. So I think we're going to end up with, I mean, who knows what will happen in the early weeks of the playoffs with the kind of heavy-handed matchups, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these top four matching up in semifinals and finals matches here before too long.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then, like we were saying last time, moving into Worlds as well. So yeah, lots coming up here. So even as we are on summer break for, Formula One, we've just got all sorts of exciting matchups here coming up in the other, categories, series, games,
Yeah,
regions.
exactly. All
I don't
over
know
the
what the
world.
word would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we had some Magic games that we were going to talk about this evening. Obviously, we've run like quite late with the race and all the matches, talking about Fernando Alonso, things like this. We had like 6 games, a little bit more. I had a bunch of points I wanted to talk about, but I think there would be enough there. I can maybe flesh it out and bring it back next week to have a little more of a conversation. Obviously, we won't have a race weekend or anything, so we'll have a little more time. Because I do enjoy covering the Magic, but we also don't want to have a 10-hour show like Gilligan. So yeah, Aaron. With that being said, hit me with your flavor of the week there.
Sounds good. So for my flavor of the week for my food, this past Thursday, Colleen and I got dinner with a couple of friends, and so we went to a place nearby, Italian restaurant, really good like pizzas, pastas, things like that. So I had a solid pizza, and then just a honorable mention. Colleen and I made some homemade like Chipotle type bowls with
Nice.
some really. I made a spicy syrup chicken. I was trying to do some. I didn't have honey, so I used syrup instead of honey, and so made a pretty spicy like glazed chicken for our bowls. It was. I'll probably look for honey in the future, but it wasn't
Sure.
too bad.
That's what that
Um,
sounds like to me.
it was really spicy though, which I did enjoy.
Hell yeah, that's sick.
So still ended up being good. For my music, or
What a
like sound whatnot, I've been listening to. I made a second summer playlist of some different kind of music vibes that I've been listening to, and we
yeah.
listened to that for a little bit while we were kayaking and all, which was pretty cool. Being out on the river with the peacefulness and everything, and just having some tunes to jam to. For my visual medium, I actually forgot to. It was something I meant to mention last week. I forgot. I would be remiss not to bring it up, but Colleen and I had watched Bohemian Rhapsody a couple weeks ago. The movie, I had not seen it. It was really, really well done.
Nice.
All the clips back and forth between Queen's real live performances and the ones in the movie were just extremely well portrayed. And it seemed to really kind of do it right in terms of a biopic and everything. So I enjoyed that very much, and that is my flavor of the week.
Very cool. That's now what's the lead actor's name that played Freddie Mercury?
It's the guy from Mr. Robot.
Is it Rami or Remy something?
Remy, yeah, Rami Malek. Yes.
Gotcha, dude. That guy
He
has
killed
got
it.
some talent. I hope he has a long and prosperous career.
Super, super impressive job as Freddie Mercury in that movie. We
Very cool.
enjoyed it a lot. So
Good. Well, I'm glad you guys enjoyed that movie. We for our visual medium here, I say our, but me and Sarah are attached at the hip, so that's how it works. We watched the new Bill Burr special, and it was funny. We definitely had some laugh out loud moments. There's a story that he tells. It's in like the back half of the special about his daughter and being in the kitchen, and I identify it. I identify with it so much that it was like heartbreaking. And so like to get one of those moments from a comedy show, it's very like I don't know what the word is, just interesting. But yeah, obviously Bill Burr kills it again. It was a great show. He did it at the Red Rocks. I don't know where that is.
Red Rocks is in Colorado.
Colorado.
Like Denver.
Okay, so yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's where it was. It was a great show. But yeah, it was it was a funny set, and the things about like his daughter and the kitchen story is like hilarious.
Nice.
Food
I
for
love
the
Bill
week.
Burr. I'll have to check it out. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No, that's fine. No, it's good. And if you enjoy Bill Burr, then you'll enjoy the special.
Yeah, I do.
So that's dope. My food for the week here. Another stack week, but instead of just talking about it ad nauseum, I have a note that Sarah talked about. So the difference, or a difference that she had made, was using like marinated tomatoes as opposed to salsa. But we found that the rice that she makes gets a weird consistency using the tomatoes, and she wasn't able to really like pinpoint what might have been doing it. Was she using too much water? Was she cooking too much, like cooking it too long or whatever? But figured out she thinks it's the tomatoes. So next time we're gonna use salsa in the rice and see if it goes back to being the the delicacy that it was.
Nice.
And then my music, you'll get a kick out of this. Was listening to Section 80 by Kendrick Lamar.
Nice.
And I had another one of these hip hop moments, man, where you hear a line and you just understand it better than you've ever understood it being said before. So in the song ADHD, where he's talking about the party at the end of the song, and he's in the back room with the female friend, and they're like talking about growing up in the 80s. They're talking about being Reagan babies, and then there's this sense that like they want to hook up, and like maybe it's kind of going somewhere. They're getting close, and then the line is, somebody walks in the room with a pound of that Bay Area Kush. She looked at it, then looked at me, then she grabbed it, and she said, "Get it understood." And I never understood the turn that he was doing there, where he's saying she ignored sex. Both of us ignored sex for this thing that just entered the room. Like they were about to be like making out and hot and heavy. They were alone.
Yeah.
This guy comes in with a pound of weed, and they were just like on to that. And then she turns around and then continues to talk about like the Reagan issue as though they weren't just about to like make out with each other. And then he's like, "That's ADHD."
Yeah.
And I was like, I never understood that conversation.
It's a good example. I don't think I realized that, but yeah, the way that your brain like bounces around from thing to thing, and like the amount of times that I don't finish like full thoughts before I'm on to the next thing is
How many times have you not finished fucking because you were on to something else? That's an interesting thought. And
that
that's
is
like
an interesting thought.
That's what he is laying out right there. Maybe not fucking, but at least like making out or something.
Yeah.
So that was powerful on a re-listen. I hadn't gone back to Section 80 in a long time.
I love Section 80. It's up there for me. It's a great album.
let me go back to the start of the show. There is an interlude on there where he has one of his buddies saying the 5 P's of performance. He's like, uh, doing something with my soul brother Kendrick Lamar. It's like it's a part of one of the interludes on that album. So like that got me thinking about it and whatever. So yeah, Section 80, great album. Kendrick Lamar, check it out. That's my flavor of the week.
I always love finding those little tidbits of things that you miss with like first listen tos or even first 30 listens to. Like there's always new things that you can find, and I think that is what the kind of creativity of these artists is, and also like the ability for people to listen through and take the music for what it means to them at different points and everything. It's pretty cool. But that does, with the conclusion of the flavor of the week, bring us to the end of our episode. Thank you all for coming and listening. Of course, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube. Check us out on Twitter at Tall and Short of One. But as always, thank you all so much for listening with us week after week. We really appreciate that so much. So,
yeah, if you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. We want to grow the audience, get as many people into this stuff as possible. So if you enjoyed it, tell somebody else. If you want to hang out with us, come into the Discord. All of our links are in the link tree below. New episodes every Thursday. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you so much. You have no idea how much we appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out.
Later.